And the next day we came in for the bone marrow biopsy. I was put under anesthesia, and I remember waking up, and the doctor that did my blood work walks in and tells me I have a form of lymphoma or leukemia. And that was like a huge shock because I did not think I was going to get diagnosed with cancer.
No.
Yeah.
And how, so you said that you were feeling these symptoms for a few months, and I suppose
Yeah.
because of the lockdown and because of COVID, it would have been very easy to just assume that it was as a result of the new way of living and
Yeah. Well, that's
sort of exactly like disenfranchised or feeling slightly deflated because of your new way of life and things that you can't do. And then when you got the diagnosis, how did you respond to that? And how did your mum respond in that sort of initial moment? What was your original reaction?
I think we responded very well. I realized that at the time there was nothing I could do about it. I was going to have to face cancer and I was going to have to deal with it. And we were kind of, in a way, exposed to cancer before. Not in a way, we were exposed to cancer before because I lost my father to cancer 4 years before this.
Oh, was
So
it?
my mom and I, we had kind of, my family and I was as well, we'd already been through something similar to this, and we knew it would be tough, but for some reason it kind of just felt like it was my chance at proving to my dad that, I can get through this for him, and that this was for a reason. This was going to be like something that we would learn from and something that we would grow from and grow together. And going through that, my response was just, listen, this is like being in college and having like a hard like essay, and I just have to get through chemo, get through the bone marrow transplant, which they told me I had to do. And then I would be okay. To me, I looked at it like a challenge. Like it was something I just had to get through, and then I would be okay.
I think that's incredibly noble and incredibly wise of you to perceive it through the lens of it being a challenge and something that you can prove to yourself that you overcame, as opposed to, I mean, I'm sure there would have been moments of despair, and we can get into them later because that's an inevitable part of being human and sort of being, I suppose, sort of, what's the word, have this bombshell drop on you like that
Yeah.
you sort of had no idea of expectations. But that's very impressive that you were mature enough to say, I'm going to, and to use your dad as sort of motivation, so to speak, as way of moving forward through that and growing as a result of the difficulty that you were facing. How did the ensuing months, and so where, I suppose, where are you now? Because that was, what was that, 2020? So you
Go. Yeah. So I had to go through a lot to get to where I am now. I had 3 rounds of chemotherapy, which ended up being like a little over 2 months of chemo. And then I had a bone marrow transplant, and I was hospitalized for a month and a half for that with my mom. My mom was with me. I had total body irradiation, which is a form of radiation. I had blasts to my lungs of radiation, and I had some of the most intense chemotherapy that they could give someone, really, in the bone marrow transplant to wipe out my old bone marrow so that when I got the new bone marrow, there was space for it to kind of come into my body and become my new bone marrow. And after those 6 weeks in the hospital, I developed a condition that was graft-versus-host disease. Because when you have a bone marrow transplant, you have a graft, and it was the donor's stem cells kind of looking at my body and saying, hey, this body is foreign, so we're going to start fighting it. So since my bone marrow transplant, really the last 3.5 years, I've been dealing with graft-versus-host disease, and now I live with chronic graft-versus-host disease. So I take immunosuppressants, and I do a treatment called extracorporeal photopheresis, which takes out my blood, weakens it, and kind of returns it to me because my immune system is essentially overactive. And it's been a long journey the last few years for sure.
Wow. So that's like a sort of a transplant sort of operation where you have like an organ donor, and then the body, you have to suppress the body's sort of innate tendency to attack
Yeah.
a foreign entity. You're going through that as well. How, so that was 4 years ago. And how did you, I suppose we could talk about the moments that felt quite dark and quite sad, how did you sort of pull through them, and what support networks do you have around you that were able to allow you to keep going in the way that you have done?
Yeah, so I had a lot of dark moments. I mean, a lot of times that I did break down, and there was so much that I went through. And when I was going through chemotherapy and the bone marrow transplant, it was at a point where, I was just dealing with so much. I didn't really have time to process it. So we were just going, going, going. And then when I developed the GVHD, that's when things really got bad because for about a year after the bone marrow transplant, the GVHD was okay. But it became in March of 2022, the GVHD became really, well, this was actually February of 2022. The GVHD became really bad and my liver was actually beginning to fail. I developed ascites in my liver. I had to have a drain in my liver because it was affecting my liver a lot. I was super yellow, super jaundiced, and my support was amazing. My mom never left my side through anything. She's really the reason why
Mm,
I am here. And there were very, very low points.
yeah.
I don't know if you've seen my Instagram where I talk about what happened, but there was a point where I was on an extremely high dose of steroids, a medication that is known to cause like depression and anxiety and psychosis, and my liver was failing at the time. So when your liver is failing and you have all these things going on, you can really get into a really depressed state. And I was in an extremely depressed state and I actually tried to take my own life. And it is National Suicide Awareness Month in September. So I would like to talk about this here and say that it was
Definitely.
crazy to go from, having this time where when I was diagnosed, I was so positive, so willing to get through this. But then it got to a point where because of the medications that were on steroids, they can actually cause you to not sleep, have extreme anxiety. And I was sleeping about an hour a night for months on end,
Wow.
extremely depressed. And after I tried to take my own life, I was taken to the hospital with my mom, and my liver was actually still doing horrible at the time. We were in the hospital for a few months after, and that was when things got way better. It was weird because for a year and a half after the transplant, nothing was going well. The GVHD was really bad. And then I got to this extremely low point where I didn't want to live anymore. And then I somehow survived that. And then after that, I was put on like a miracle drug that allowed me to live and get out of the hospital. And ever since then, this was a little over 2 years ago, I haven't been admitted to the hospital for anything related to graft-versus-host disease, just like knee surgeries because I have issues with my knees. So it took me getting to like an extremely low point mentally for things to get better. I literally went to the lowest point of my entire life. And then after that, it's like I just started healing. It was crazy the way it all panned out.
Yeah. Well, it's like the what's the saying? There's a saying, the lights. It's always darkest on the dawn of the light, or on the dawn of the light, or something like that.
Yeah, but it's true. It felt
It,
like that. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's really incredibly, for someone to go through the sort of atrocity that you went through at such a young age, and to have reached that conclusion, and that to be sort of where you are now. And I suppose the great thing is, because you're so young, your body can heal way better than it could if you were sort of 50 years older or something. And you're to have a positive outlook given through that, and the fact that you made it through that moment is really powerful. I spoke to another guy who suffered with an autoimmune condition that nearly killed him, and it was very interesting actually, because he was also a very, very fit and healthy athletic guy, and he was like in the ICU, and he was really, really not in a good way. And the conclusion that we kind of reached, or he reached, and I sort of coaxed out of him, was that if it wasn't for his family and the love of his family and support of his family, as well as the sort of existent fitness that he had accrued as a result of all the exercise, he may not have been able to pull through in the way he did. And just as you were talking, I wonder if the fitness levels that you had before you became really ill, I wonder what part that played in sort of keeping you buoyant for as long a time as it could do, and maybe even helping you overcome the condition sort of in the long run. What do you think about that? I suppose particularly with the family, because that's a bit more tangible. You already mentioned that your mum was really key, and I can only imagine that in times like that, having people around you that love and care about you is sort of like the be all and end all almost.
Yeah, definitely the fitness level helped a lot.
Yeah.
When I was
Yeah.
diagnosed, I became so weak immediately when I started chemo.
Mm.
So it was like, if I was that strong before and chemo made me that weak that quickly, imagine if I wasn't that strong before.
Because
I
I've
wasn't
seen photos of you before. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't even be able to walk. So, because I was barely able to, I remember the first time after chemo, I was trying to like lift weights. I couldn't lift weights. I had to lift like little canned foods and just like curl them and shoulder press. I couldn't lift anything over like a pound. So I was so weak to go from so strong to lifting hundreds of pounds in the gym, deadlifting like 300 pounds to going to this. It was crazy because it was just such a quick drop off. And if I hadn't been that strong going into this, it would have made it a lot more challenging for sure. And I think that that's definitely one of the reasons why I survived and why I was able to keep going and be positive was because I was so strong going into it that during chemo I could still do stuff, and that kept me mentally sane, knowing that I could still like go for little walks and I still had a little bit of strength in me from before.
Yeah, you had that like the residual sort of stock base level fitness that you had, as much as it was must have been incredibly difficult. The fact that you got down to that point, it also must have been exceptionally beneficial for you to give you the building blocks to build yourself back up. So where are you? Where are you now? How are things doing? How are you doing at the moment, health wise and mental health wise?
Yeah, things are pretty good. My mental health has been so much better. My health overall has been a lot better too. I still have graft-versus-host disease in my liver, my skin, my mouth, and my GI, but it's not as bad as it used to be. I still take immunosuppressants. I'm still in treatment, but overall things are good. I had my knee replaced because of necrosis, which is a side effect from being on steroids, which are a drug
Yeah.
that destroy your joints. I was on them for a while. And overall, I'm doing very well considering everything that I've been through. You
Mm.
know, I have a lot of issues that come with my chronic illness, but, you know, I'm here. I have a way better quality of life than I ever thought I would have. You know, I went surfing yesterday, which is crazy. I didn't think I'd ever be able to surf again
Nice.
because of my joints and my health, but getting back into it a little, which is awesome. So things are doing really, really well health-wise, honestly.
That's
Very
good.
lucky.
Yes, definitely. How did it feel to be surfing? How was that?
It felt good. I mean, it felt amazing. It's hard on my joints because I have a lot of joint issues, so my feet are killing me today.
Okay.
And we're gonna go and try to talk to some surgeons because I have some issues with my bones and my feet and my elbows. So we're gonna see if there's something we can do about that. But you know, it's just really lucky that I'm able to do more again.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think I've ever surfed before, but it looks an incredibly liberating and freeing sort of experience. So for you, given where you've been, it must have been quite magical. And hopefully you can sort of carry on doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely. So you've written a book. Have you written multiple books? Have you got a
but
couple of
one,
books? Just the one, okay.
this one, yeah,
Just one. At the moment, at the moment. And
yeah, more in the
where
future.
yes, and how did that what's it called and how did it come about?
So the book is called Beyond the Blood. And it came about because when I was going through all this with chemo and GVHD, someone in the hospital, one of the nurses told me about a book that a cancer survivor wrote, and I read her book. And it really inspired me to write my own book because I was like, well, she was an amazing writer, way better writer than I am. But it still inspired me because her book was really raw and real, and it was really, really interesting. Very great read. It's called Between Two Kingdoms by Suleika Jawad, an amazing book, and it inspired me to write my own book. And my mom and I, we always talked about writing a book, and I was like, you know, I'm just going to do it because why not? I have a diary that I write in every single day. It's on my computer. I pulled some stuff from my diary, and I just put it together and wrote a little book.
And Yes, no, I can imagine writing a book isn't obviously not just possibly beneficial for the people that might read it, but also really beneficial for you to sort of
Mhm.
to articulate things and get them going and put them down onto paper. And you got the podcast as well, haven't you? So talk to people about the podcast and why you and your mum decided to set that up.
Yeah, my mom and I, we decided to do this podcast because we wanted to, like my mom always says, dig deeper because we did a lot of posts on social media about what I was going through when I was diagnosed. And it's kind of hard to put everything into a few paragraphs that Instagram or
Can
TikTok,
imagine.
whatever, limits you to. So she was posting on Facebook updates as well about my health, but we wanted to do something where we could explain to people what I was going through within like a 20 to 30-minute conversation between my mom and I. And it started to become us. First, it was just us talking, and we were like talking about what I had been through. And then we had the idea to interview other cancer survivors. And now we interview cancer survivors like all the time on our podcast. We have some amazing people on there. And the whole goal is just to spread like stories of hope and messages of hope of cancer survivors kind of just like around the world.
Yeah, it must be really therapeutic for your mum to be given an opportunity to express how she felt during that situation to you in a way that isn't sort of emotionally burdensome on
Mhm.
you because it's she can talk about it through the sort of the context of discussing other people. So, because obviously it must have been horrific for her to watch her son go through that. Has she spoken to you about how sort of proud she is of you about what you're doing now and where you've come from?
Yeah,
Good.
every day. Yeah, it's the best. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's what you want. Um, so we're 20 minutes in. It's flown by. Should we'll do 10 more minutes, yeah? And then
Sounds amazing.
that sounds amazing. Perfect. Okay. So what, how, what things do you do now to help your mental health? What sort of practices do you engage in to keep you going and to help you? I don't like the term move on because I don't think you need to move on from
Yeah,
what.
we don't move on.
Yeah, exactly. To continue.
Yeah, so we do, my mom and I, we do a lot of speaking together. We have
Yes.
the podcast. That obviously helps. I started playing electric guitar like a year and a half ago because I couldn't really surf at that time or be in the gym because of my health. So electric guitar helped me a lot and I still play it. It's super fun. And now that I'm able to work out a little more, I got a gym membership. So getting back into the gym has been huge. Taking cold showers every day has also been part of my routine. And meditating, those are a bunch of things that really help me. Also, I have a really crazy Lego collection. So Lego has been huge for me. Just like stuff like that that is fun. You know, we give back to the community a lot. I lead a support group every Friday, which I'll lead in a few hours for cancer patients and cancer survivors.
Oh, wow.
And I'm part of a bunch of like organizations that I do some work with. So really just stuff that I know is putting out a purpose into the world, like social media and making inspirational videos has really been a huge part of my journey. And it helps with my mental health because I know I'm helping someone else.
How did you get into the public speaking?
Yeah, we got into the public speaking because about 2 years ago, someone asked us to just give a little talk about what we had been through on this. I forgot the name of it, but there was like an event for the hospital, and
Hmm.
we were all there. It was for cancer survivors and adolescents and young adults with cancer. And they asked my mom and I to be on a panel to discuss what we had been through and share how we got through everything. And then we gave that little talk, and it was just like, oh, we actually kind of are good at this. So we started joining public speaking groups in Miami, this thing called Toastmasters, and
Yeah, I've
we were
heard.
going to those every week. We haven't gone in a while, but we're getting a speech this Sunday, and we've gotten a lot of, speeches through organizations like the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society and our hospitals locally. We've done a lot of speaking through them, and at other events, we've just given lots of speeches. And it's been great. I really think it's amazing to just spread our message and
Yeah.
share the story in any capacity possible. So it started off slow, and we're trying to get more speaking engagements, but I love it. It's great. It's a great way to help people.
Yeah, and because you come as like a duo, the two of you, you have the ability to give both sides of
Yeah.
the story and the narrative and express how it felt individually for both of you. And just as you were talking, I was just thinking it was interesting, I suppose, about maybe it's quite common, but your initial reaction was very positive, and you're able to tell people how that positivity, why it was that positivity sort of slightly uh, sort of evaporated as such, and then the point where you got to the lowest point, and then the positivity came back. And I think that's a really interesting sort of art that you had the ability to sort of, as I've already addressed, you had the ability to see it as an opportunity, which is quite exceptional. And
Yeah.
then, but then obviously, like it was really hard, evidently, and then things sort of took over, and then you and now here you are. Yeah, so I'm intrigued with, I'll ask the final question, which we may have already covered, but I just want to ask it anyway. So the reason it's called the Breaking Point podcast, because I'm interested in people's sort of lowest moments, or even maybe even highest moments, where they thought they had sort of a reckoning, where they thought, oh, I need to make a change, or I need to reconfigure the world. Can you think of like the lowest moment that you got to, and what it was? You mentioned a new drug that you went on that really helped you. Was that obviously hugely influential in in your sort of reinvigoration? But can you think of a moment that was really pivotal?
Yeah, it was that low moment where I didn't want to live anymore. And then I remember a few weeks later being in the hospital, and I was taken off the steroids. And once I got off those steroids, I found my will to live again, because
Yeah.
it was a huge part of it was the steroids causing my mental health to decline. And I remember, just smiling for the first time in months. And that was when I realized, like, I'm gonna recover, and it's gonna take a while for me to recover mentally and physically, but there's hope again. And just to see that hope and feel that hope, not just see it, but feel it, was such a pivotal moment. And since then,
Yeah.
I think I've just realized that, like, anything is kind of possible in a certain way, because if I could go so low and then come back from that, then, you never know what can happen in life. So don't give up that hope, because hope is what keeps us going.
Completely, man. I think that's a brilliant place to stop it. And fair play to you. Which fair play? Do you know what that means? It's a very English phrase. It means like
Yeah, it's like